gentlemen, just a bit of housekeeping to start with. We're not expecting a fire alarm to go off, but if it does, there are various fire exits around the room, and you'll need to make your way to the bottom of the school field next to the Sunshine Preschool, which would be interesting in the dark. Okay, so my name's Bridget Smith. I'm one of the 2 district councillors in Gamlingay. My colleague Sebastian is sat at the back there. He's also county councillor for Gamlingay. I've lived in the village for over 30 years. My youngest son was a pupil at this school, and I used to teach at GVC. Indeed, I know I taught at least one person in this room, and they will probably recall that I had a reputation for strict but fair, and that's the way I would like to conduct this meeting. I feel I need to say that it's obvious that we do not all hold the same opinions in this room, and I realise we're going to be discussing issues which many people feel very passionately about. I hope you won't need to be reminded that we're in a school, and therefore it is most appropriate that we will conduct ourselves in the way we would expect our children to behave in this room, and that we treat each other with respect, and we treat each other's views with respect. I'm sure it won't come to it, but if we can't manage to do that, then I will close the meeting. But I don't believe this afternoon's meeting went very, very well indeed, so I don't imagine that's going to be an issue. So I'd just like to introduce you to the people who are here to answer your questions. We have Mr. Stephen Munday, who is the Executive Principal for Comberton Village College and the Chief Executive for Comberton Academy Trust. We have Mr. Russell Gray, who is the Chair of the Governing Board for this school. And we have Mrs. Shelley Desborough, who, as you know, is your new head teacher. The reason I'm chairing this meeting is that I was invited some time ago by the governing body to chair the working party which has been steering this consultation process. And the reason the governors wanted an outsider to be involved was to introduce extra transparency and challenge to the process. I'm an associate member for the duration of this process, but I do not have voting rights. That's all down purely to the governing body. And this meeting has been called as part of the statutory consultation process required to become an academy, to allow you as parents and carers to ask questions about issues which you feel have not been adequately addressed through the consultation and documentation which you've all had. I'm going to ask you to restrict yourselves to one succinct question rather than long statements and debate, and if time allows, I'll be able to ask you to contribute a further question. But it's important that everybody has an opportunity to ask at least one. I've got quite a lot of pre-submitted questions, which I will introduce at intervals if I think those things aren't being covered by the questions that are coming from the floor. I'd ask you to raise your hands when you want to speak, and I'd like you to stand when you ask the question. I'll then put your question to the person who's best suited to answer it. I'd also ask you to appreciate that we're probably not in a position to answer questions on behalf of Gamlingay Village College and Stratton Educational Trust. Having said that, both I and Mrs. Desborough met last week independently with the new head teacher at Gamlingay Village College, where we both had very positive and helpful conversations, but Mr. Burkitt agreed that questions about SET and GVC really need to be put to his own governing body. Mr. Gray is going to start off by saying a few words about the consultation process, and then Mr. Munday is going to speak about CMAT, and then we'll move on to the questions. Now, what was interesting, I just want to say very quickly, this afternoon, we had just as many people here this afternoon, and it was a useful process, not just because the people here were able to ask questions, but actually there was quite a lot of information coming back, which the governors are going to take on board and take further. One thing in particular was there was a lot of questions about Year 5 and 6 children who are currently at Gamlingay Village College, and whether there was an opportunity for the date at which the first school comes into the catchment for possibly Comberton Village College could be brought back so that Year 6 children could, if they wanted, make that transition through to Comberton Village College because they were deemed to be in catchment. So that is something that the governors are going to need to take away and consult more with, get more information to find out whether the timescales allow that to happen. All right. So I'm hoping that information comes back from you, which then the governors can then work up. So I'd like it to be a two-way process. So if I hand over to Mr. Gray, initially we'll just introduce the consultation process and then we will crack on. The meeting this afternoon was an hour and a quarter long. This is going to be an hour and a quarter long. The school has to be locked up by 8:30, so we will finish at 8:15 sharp. Thank you. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm Russell Gray, new chair of governors at Gamlingay First School. I'm here this evening to represent the governing body of the First School, and we of course have a duty of care to the children of the First School to ensure that their education, whilst received at the First School, is of an outstanding quality, and also that their pathway through education after they leave us is also of a suitable quality. The proposals before us over this consultation period is obviously to extend the age of the school to become a primary school, and then also to become an academy and join with the Comberton Academy Trust, which is the current recommendation of the government. As you know, the consultation process has been ongoing now for a couple of weeks. It will finish at the early part of October. There will be an opportunity to send back response forms for all the parents. We've obviously opened up consultation to everybody in local community groups across the village, and there's been plenty of feedback already, as you are very aware, from lots of people all around the village and beyond. The reason behind the proposals is due to the worries of parents and staff and other people over the last number of years, which have been brought to the attention of the governors, that maybe the quality of information and the opportunities and choices within the village for Gamlingay children are limited to the three-tier system, and therefore there should be wider choice. Therefore we have the two proposals in front of us. Obviously the school currently is reducing in number. We've had to reduce class sizes. Every time a pupil leaves the school we lose money, and of course as schools shrink then it's very hard to maintain educational standards, and actually even more difficult to actually improve standards, which of course is what we want to do here. A good school is good, but an outstanding school is outstanding, and I'm sure, I can't speak for Mr. Monday, but I'm sure when he wakes up on a Monday morning he thinks, I want to improve everything even more. Okay. So that's kind of where we're at. Can I pass it over back to you, Bridget?
Thank you. Well, if we'd like to ask Mr. Monday to talk about Comberton Village College and the Multi-Academy Trust for about 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll try and stick to that. Thank you. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much indeed for the opportunity to join you this evening and say a few words, particularly about the Comberton Academy Trust and that side of this proposal about becoming an academy potentially and joining the Academy Trust that Comberton Village College and 3 other academies are currently in. I'm well aware that actually the questions might well be about certain other aspects of the proposals here. I'll do my very best to answer any of those insofar as I'm in a position sensibly to do that. Perhaps I should start by saying that absolutely every morning when I wake up on Monday, the first thought in my mind is how do I improve things further, and that's constantly on my mind. It's true. The Comberton Academy Trust, just really quickly, started in 2011 to allow Comberton Village College to become an academy, as it was permitted to do, and governors had thought that was the best way forward, that made sense for the school, and it was the right way to push forward further still in numbers of ways. So the Comberton Academy Trust was formed because you have to have a trust to oversee an academy. That's the way the system worked. Very soon, that trust was approached by the Department for Education and Peterborough City Council to ask if they were prepared to help to work with a school in challenging circumstances in Peterborough, the Voyager Academy, which they agreed to do, and that was taken on from September 2011 onwards. 2 further developments that took place then as well were, once we got to September 2013, a new school was opened by the Trust at Cambs, what's known as Cambs Village College, was set up as a so-called free school, which really means it's a new academy. It's a system, I guess these days, one of the key systems for opening new schools. The local authority were keen that should go ahead as well, because everyone knew there needed to be a school there, given obviously the ongoing growth of the population. That is relevant to part of the proposal that's being made here, insofar as Camborne children used to feed into Comberton Village College and were part of Comberton Village College's catchment area until September 2013. Now, obviously, as a secondary school in its own right, in Camborne, and Camborne children go to that school, so Camborne is no longer part of the catchment area of Comberton Village College, and you begin to see that there's a relevance there for one aspect of the proposals. Also in September 2013, Melbourne Village College, another Cambridgeshire village college, asked to join the trust, and trustees felt that that was an appropriate positive development because they felt they were much better placed within a larger group of schools to move forward and work with others rather than to try and exist in isolation as a relatively smaller secondary school. So that's where things are at the moment. In terms of the view of trustees, we've asked this a little bit, trustees are very clear that with a locally based trust like this, it would be a strength, and they hope, to everyone involved if there were to be a school, which would have to be an academy, coming into the trust that was not of the same phase, i.e. not secondary, and that actually the richness of what could be offered, the professional developments all involved, would be better still if there was more than just one phase of education. So certainly there'd be a view to welcome the possibility of a primary academy coming in as part of the trust and the various developments that might bring that could be beneficial to all. A couple of further things about the trust that I hope would feel were relevant. What's the trust really all about? Well, what trustees would say is ultimately it's about some key values, some core principles, and that's what defines what we're trying to do and what we believe in. And any academy that will in the trust really needs to believe in these principles and be aiming for these principles that we're all working at together. Very simply, excellence is principle number one. We want education to be the very best that it could possibly be for the young people who are coming through the academies in the Comberton Academy Trust, Comberton Village College and elsewhere. Secondly, the comprehensive principle. In other words, educational excellence has got to be for all. It's excellence for all. Every child of every sort of background, every ability, every outlook, all together can do their very, very best within the same school setting. That's something we believe very strongly, believe is possible, and believe you get it right. It's actually the best way to do it, the best thing for communities as well. There's the community principle then, number three, which believes that schools should be strongly rooted in their local communities, and part of their local communities, serve communities appropriately, be more than just places where youngsters of certain ages turn up at certain times on certain days. There's the partnership principle, fourthly, we must work in partnership with others. It's not good enough to try and just do things on your own, because that doesn't actually work in anyone's benefit. And finally, we call it the international principle. There should be some sort of international flavour to education, because that's just so important in our world today. It seems to get ever more important, and therefore we want to make sure that that's true in a meaningful way in all of the academies in the trust. So those are the core key principles that we would expect any schools strongly to be holding to that were involved with the Comberton Academy Trust. The way of operating in terms of oversight and leadership is the Trust wants to have local governing bodies for each of its school/academies. Some trusts don't take that view. They say the Trust shall just run things directly. Trustees, the Comberton Academy Trust, believe in localism, and the local governing bodies working with the local leadership, the local head teacher, is the right way to do schooling within the trust. Obviously, there's an ultimate responsibility that trustees have to oversee key things such as educational standards, financial probity, and employment issues, but governance and leadership works best when it's done locally. Head teacher and local governing bodies then reporting ultimately to the trust, and indeed myself in a chief executive role as well. And finally, in terms of these discussions, it's worth just thinking through that there are numbers of reasons why increasing, I think, in the educational landscape we're in, that schools are thinking seriously about both becoming an academy, but both, perhaps especially, in wider groupings of schools. And there's sort of push and pull factors, I think, with all of that are driving many schools to think seriously or to have taken that step. There's some push factors that say the support mechanisms that have been around schools are disappearing. You know, whether we think that's a bad idea, a good idea, or whatever, it's just happening. So local authorities can't offer the level of support that they did previously as resources diminishing, and schools themselves have got to sort out ways amongst themselves of being able to look after themselves and being masters of their own destiny. So there's sort of a push there. But I think there's a lot of pull factors as well. There are ways in which groups of schools working together can get significant financial benefits from doing that, considerable educational benefits, looking at the way that you can provide more specialist offers, specialist staff when you work a group as a whole, and a lot more powerful professional development when working with others in other schools. That's a richer professional experience than not doing so. So numbers of reasons why any school, such as Gamlingay First School, would seriously be thinking about both becoming an academy and joining a wider trust with another group of school/academies. But one other point just to point out, then finally, before I do shut up, honest, is just to say that on the catchment area bits, which obviously fits in with the wider proposal about going to years 5 and 6, which I know the school is proposing here, that is not the same as wishing to become an academy. The school could become an academy, join the Comberton Academy Trust without having to do that. So there's more than one proposal going on here. But clearly, going into years 5 and 6, then at that point, you would need a secondary school to feed into, if that were the case. Hence, there would need to be a catchment secondary school. That is particularly relevant to the point that I mentioned earlier about Cambs Village College opening, because since September 2013, there have been a considerable number of places available at Comberton Village College each year for out-of-catchment children. So, for example, with current year 7, there's more than 70 children in that year group who have come into the school from outside of the catchment area of the school. Now, the point about that is, I know people might very well ask, how on earth is this accommodated? The idea of potentially quite a good number of further children coming from within catchment is for that reason, that there is significant room at Comberton Village College to add more catchment children without in any way affecting pre-existing catchment children from the pre-existing feeder primaries, and all of that can be accommodated from what's known about numbers now, and indeed what's known about developments coming in the future. So it's probably helpful that I say that now, because I know it's one of the quite reasonable issues that people will want to ask about. That's me done.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm just going to start off with one of the pre-submitted questions because it leads on quite well there. So you said there's capacity there. Are you looking at adding other schools other than Gamlingay First School into your catchment? And is there any risk then that because we're quite a long way away, that actually we will then struggle to keep those places? You know, might schools that become part of the academy nearer to you get priority over us?
Fine. There's two things here. There's the Comberton Academy Trust, which has numbers of schools in it, and it could be possible that there are some other primaries that have an interest in joining a Comberton Academy Trust. For example, pre-existing feeder primary schools. Now, you know, that could happen, and for reasons said, there could be some mutual benefit in that sort of thing. The particular point, though, is about the catchment area of Comberton Village College that we're particularly talking about. That there's no other primary school suggesting an interest in any possibility of joining the catchment area of Comberton Village College at the moment. Clearly, particularly governors at Comberton Village College, but also then the general trustees of the Academy Trust, should not and would not think of the possibility of saying to any school that they might reasonably be part of the catchment area, if they weren't very clear that they could clearly be places available for all children, should those children choose, and that's a choice that obviously people can exercise. Should they choose to come in, there must be places available for all catchment. Otherwise, the truth is it's a nonsense. You know, why call it a catchment school if there aren't places available? So they'd only be entering into this discussion with governors here if they were confident and clear that that could clearly happen. If another school came on and said, oh, do you think we could join us? I said, well, hang on, you know, numbers add up to this, and you would only consider that if you were confident that you could admit all catchment children, and you shouldn't be doing it otherwise, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll start moving to questions from the floor. So if I could just remind you to restrict yourself to questions, please. Yes, the lady there. Hello.
So, just following on from what you were saying, according to this piece of paper that we've been given, it says that the schools are oversubscribed, but there's a little bit underneath that says temporary imbalance prior to the opening of Cambs Village College. How many of that number of the 1,740 good Comberton Village College, so what's the difference between what space you've actually got? What's the number?
Okay, the average number feeding through, I think the relevant statistic here is year groups that are now coming through, because that's what we're talking about, I think, isn't it, for future year groups. There are, according to the feeder primary school population figures coming through from the county, that obviously we had to work through, that go through quite a lot of years back, there's the sort of numbers that I've just been talking about, on average around about 70 spaces that are not filled if children in feeder primaries, as now listed, attend Comberton Village College. There's 70 or so. If you go up to year 10 and 11, there's 300 in the year groups there, because Cambs still included, and there's very, very few places in those year groups that were coming from out of catchment, because the whole of the Cambs community, secondary age children, was named in Comberton Village College's catchment, and the school had to make sure it expanded, the funding had to be made available for that, and ways were worked out, and we pushed that, if we needed to, a little bit above 300 to make sure we accommodate. That all disappeared with current year 9 downwards because of the opening of Cambs Village College. So the official admission number went down to 240, but the numbers in catchment typically over, and it stays stable if you look through right the way down, are typically around somewhere 170 to 180, and governors already made it clear, because of what they've done, they are prepared happily to admit closer to 250 or so in a year group if appropriate. So that's where this significant number of currently out of catchment exists, which means that there could be space for a significant number of extra catchment children without in any way impacting any of the current catchment children.
How does that affect, what's